Listen. So let me start with, saying that I'm going to make kind of 10 points of observation about the elections. The first is, of course, following what Amir has been saying and then Harish flagged that this time the elections have taken on an extra significance. Okay, and as Amir said, that there are those, including us, who see it as an election for saving democracy. Okay, democracy is itself in peril, and this is, quite easily understandable because to an extent that I didn't notice before in 2019 or 2014 about the Constitution, which I think also kind of has a resonance with the, in some sense, the Shaheen Bagh movement, which kind of brought forth the question of Constitution in a major way. With Article 370, the removal of Article 370, with the question of democracy and social welfare, and as Harish has just said, social justice, which has come out to be a major question. Although, Harish thinks that the real champions of social justice have become a bit marginalized in this polarization between the two blocks. I think nevertheless the agenda of social justice has emerged to be very major agenda. Now there is little doubt, I don't think there is any point in fooling ourselves about the fact that the ruling party of BJP and NDA appears to be what we call hegemonic in social sciences and in political science. But the interesting thing about this hegemony is that, and this has something to do with the speed of politics, which becomes very interesting, especially during elections, that there is a change between January and May. In January, the ruling regime and the ruling coalition looked far more formidable, and the electoral win looked like it was a foregone conclusion. But this is not the case any longer. There seems to be appearing serious cracks and fault lines, areas of weakness in the otherwise hegemonic kind of dominance of the NDA, and these fault lines and these cracks, of which we'll talk a bit more in a bit, are being attacked by the opposition in the India bloc and other formations. Most importantly, I think what has changed with regard to the last two Loksabha elections is that there used to be the Tina factor. There is no alternative. I think this is this election, we no longer have that sort of an impression of there being no alternative to the ruling regime or to the Prime Minister. India has emerged to be, in the India bloc has emerged to be at least a fighting opposition that for many deserves fair chances across many constituencies. What I derive from this, and this gets confirmed by the fact that if you listen to the speeches and to the kind of publications, handouts and conversations of BJP leaders or NDA representatives, you'll see that it's actually, for the first time perhaps, and you may differ with me, it has kind of fallen back to a sort of fuzzy and defensive kind of narrative. The agenda of Ram Mandir no longer seems to be universally effective. Its influence has waned among many in the population. There are more and more people who seem to be thinking that the BJP's delivery of development in concrete terms of health, education, food security, so on and so forth, it looks quite shaky. Another very important thing that had made opposition to the regime very difficult earlier has shifted, which is the identification of the regime with the nation. So speaking against the regime or criticizing the regime was very easy to kind of club with being anti-national, for instance. This has loosened up, and there is a way in which people can make a distinction between seriously criticizing the regime and that having no contradiction with being nationalists, for that matter. The ruling party speeches are, in some sense, they have very few unpredictable factors. Most of it is kind of familiar rehashing of old rhetoric. For example, calling the opposition Tukre gang, which is, as you know, associated with JNU, calling them anti-Hindu, calling them pro-Muslim, Muslim appeasing, and, welfare is to a dangerous kind of an extent. All these, points, all these speaking points we are fairly familiar with. At the same time, we know that BJP is also kind of handing out counter welfare schemes and, promising a whole lot of counter welfare schemes. Now, the most important reason why I think that much of the BJP's narrative in that sense this time is defensive is because most of its polemic and speeches are basically attempts to distract one's attention from issues like inflation, unemployment, the rising inequality of wealth, crony capitalism, scams like electoral bonds, etc. So in some sense, I constantly see thing that seems to be going in favor of them, which is, somewhat vague and entirely, constructed, but has found some credence among people, some sort of purchase among people, is that apparently India's image abroad in foreign countries have gone up, and India now enjoys a different degree of respect that it never enjoyed. So this is probably the only factor that I think is working in favor of the NDA coalition. The opposition, which largely is the India bloc led by Congress, but also there are a host of other regional parties and small formations, they seem to be, to my mind, they seem to have sidestepped a populist agenda. They could have very easily gone into a counter-populist agenda, and they are converging precisely around the issues that India is trying to distract from, issues of unemployment, inflation, gas cylinder, miserable conditions of the poor, lack of economic development, privatization of public resources, selling off national property like railways, airways, public sector units, and the use of government agencies to destroy a level playing field, the situation in Manipur, which is, kind of burning for a long time, and especially the plight of women. But I think the most credible threat that the opposition is managing to pose to the NDA bloc is that the purpose of winning 400 plus seats, and some have referred already before, is, as several BJP leaders immediately confirmed after this slogan came up, is that despite the refutation of some central leaders, the point of winning 400 plus seats is opens up the possibility of fundamentally amending the constitution. And, what many suspect to be doing away with the thrust for social justice. This is, in my reading, it has turned out to be the biggest weakness in the ruling party narrative, as they know that the opposition's charge is not very far from what people think to be true. Besides, the slogan shows a confidence, which is 400 plus slogan, shows a confidence that is actually missing from the BJP's recent efforts to include defectors from the opposition, somewhat desperately. The most interesting development in all this seems to me is that it is the first time when, as a result, the ruling party is unable to set the narrative according to which the election is going to be fought, and therefore to set the immediate agenda for the elections. Now, howsoever fragile and internally heterogeneous the India bloc may appear, and thus they may appear weak before a united and formidable BJP, it is their narrative of inflation, unemployment, failure to deliver development that BJP seems to be responding to most of the time. And this is dragging them to a ground which they are, which they find to be themselves to be weak on. This is the ground of, at some level, hardcore economics, statistics, facts, figures, and obvious evident signs in everyday life like that of inflation, jobs, hunger, crisis of health services, education. This is no longer proving easy to be dismissed by invoking sheer pride or contempt around particular religions. Because, as I am trying to say, the narrative has decisively changed, at least for now. Of course, one must not underestimate the NDA strength, their command over resources, and their widespread support among cross-sections of public backed by powerful publicity machinery, media, IT cell, etc. Now, technologically and with regard to the psychology of communicating with the masses, it seems the BJP is far superior to any other party at this moment, let alone Congress. A major factor showcasing all these areas of strength is the building up of the image of the Prime Minister, the individual image of the Prime Minister, which started with the hugely successful turn to the charismatic leader-based populism model, which Ajay has written copiously about and very eloquently, the building up of the Prime Minister's image as a charismatic leader that actually paid high dividends in 2014 and then in 2019. In this election, it appears that this particular process has become saturated and probably has gone over a tipping point. Compared to the past Loksabha elections, the personal charisma of the PM seems to have significantly fewer takers, especially among the youth who were adolescent fans before in 2014 and now appear very worried and increasingly unhappy about the scarcity of jobs. So this is where I'm coming to, kind of the end of what I had to say. This is where I think the most sophisticated strategy of the opposition bloc, India, appears to have created an effect that is not immediately or apparently visible. I'm talking about a strategy that I believe to be very sophisticated and interesting. What is this strategy? Sometime last year or previous year, it seems, several leaders of the India bloc realized that the BJP star campaigners thrive most when it is made into a presidential type of contest, like pitting Modi against Rahul Gandhi. What we can see therefore is, despite the key leader being Rahul Gandhi, or at least one of the key leaders, there is an array of regional leaders this time who are key campaigners in their respective regions. So you have Sharad Pawar, Uddhav Thackeray, Arvind Kejriwal, Mamata Banerjee, Stalin, DK Shiv Kumar, Revant Reddy, Vijayan, and several others. This makes it logistically very difficult for the 2 or 3 star BJP speakers and campaigners to take on this entire race. This was the reason behind Rahul Gandhi's decision to not contest from Rai Bareli. It changes, completely takes away the shift for focus from Smriti Irani and the expected pattern of events. Now we need to remember that the BJP has delivered on its core agendas, ideologically speaking. Ram Mandir, Article 370 removal, bringing in uniform civil code. Now this will no doubt make its core constituencies happy and secure their support for NDA. One can see this in the many independent YouTube news channels. Chunks of such supporters are middle-aged, middle-class people like me, unfortunately. Interestingly. But the delivery of this agenda has not really got new supporters into their ranks. Despite fighting on 370 across the country, the BJP is not contesting in Kashmir itself, which is quite telling. With Ram Mandir, the calculation seems to have been a bit premature, too early to kick in for the elections. UCC remains very hotly debated on constitutional grounds. Thus, given that they reached the high point of 300 in 2019, it seems fairly unlikely that they will touch that figure again, this time without something like a Balakot and a huge emotional wave. So to be fair, it seems the ruling party is going to lose a significant chunk of seats from what they had won in the last elections. They are, for all practical purposes, more or less shut out from the south. Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, you name it, Telangana. Their prospects also don't look very happy, as Harish was reminding us, in Rajasthan, Haryana, Punjab, Delhi, Maharashtra, where they're likely to lose seats. And these are regions where they had scored very high, including Karnataka. While UP and Bihar remain crucial, and Bihar along with Maharashtra, West Bengal and Karnataka are, one of the kind of swing states, what are referred to as swing states. They can, UP and Bihar remain crucial and they can look to retain their seats safely in Uttarakhand, Himachal and to my mind in Madhya Pradesh, besides Gujarat. But two minor developments are interesting to take note. One is the withdrawal of candidates in Surat and in Indore. Now both these places are known as strong grounds of the RSS and BJP organization. Now one wonders if these were really strong and sure grounds, what was the necessity to push opposition candidates to withdraw their nominations? Okay, so does it show signs of nervousness? I am told that the opposition's conservative estimate of winning seats in UP is around 10 to 15. Okay, by sources I think reliable, and somewhat lesser number in Bihar, where Nitish seems to have lost some credibility. So basically I believe the ruling party will look to replenish its losses in the east, Assam, Tripura and West Bengal, even as they lose ground in Manipur. Besides Assam, they have strong contesting regional opposition elsewhere. The situation is tricky in West Bengal, I am afraid. The BJP is strong in North Bengal and growing quite rapidly in the south, with new blocks of supporters among precisely the Bengali Dalit Namashudra refugees who have been promised citizenship under the CAA by the BJP. The ruling TMC, as we know, is plagued by serious charges of corruption and the same problem of being based on one charismatic leader. However, it has managed to grow a stable support base among the rural poor, especially women, with its competitive welfare schemes. Given that the Congress and CPM have recovered some ground of late and challenged the TMC, despite sharing the opposition bloc, there are two kinds of speculations about the BJP's prospects in West Bengal. One estimate says that their tally will grow from 18 seats last time to 25 plus. The version is that the continued harassment of the state and the TMC rule by the centre will bring down the tally to around 15 or under. Now if we go by the optimistic projection for BJP, this means they can add roughly 10 seats in the east, while they lose roughly around 50 seats by conservative estimates elsewhere, which should bring them around 260, a little short of the number needed to form the government, and even if they form the government, not a brute majority. The optimistic projection for the opposition, on the other hand, is that the BJP gets restricted to somewhere around 230 or 240, which will create a chance for a coalition government. So the decisive battle comes down to 30 to 40 seats across the country, which will be, I think, decided by the narrative that proves to be more powerful. India as a potential superpower versus India undergoing the highest unemployment and inflation, among the periods since independence. Naturally, this gives a decisive role to the youth as to the poor. Regardless of the result, this is a structurally positive development this time. Do I have 5 more minutes to... The last point that I wanted to add here is regardless of who wins or loses, okay, and we have to take that kind of a stance to elections, okay, despite our best efforts. I believe there is another factor in this election that has a profound kind of implication, and it has to do with a change in the language of electoral politics in this country. In a long time, and despite the shrill and screaming tone of electronic television media, one can now hear a growing, sober, thoughtful and imaginative language that counters, racial polarization and pitting one section with another. There are speeches that are calm but exciting, restrained and yet provocative, challenging and yet not manipulative, showing an enduring conviction in the Constitution, in social justice, and a critically secular vision of an accountable democracy, accountable to the people. I am very happy to say, despite sharing the pessimism of Amir, that a big part of this change in the political language is a direct contribution of JNU. The public and campaign speeches of Kanhaiya Kumar, Sandeep Saurabh, Deepshita Dhar, Oishi Ghosh, and several others, whose videos you might be watching on social media bear this out. It is a language that also calls for taking responsibility for why and how JNU was attacked and made into a villain in 2016. I would like to believe that it is JNU that provided the crucial insight about how the style and language, the very discourse of politics, is a vital ground of intervention. How does one rearticulate a social justice agenda that will become universal across classes, communities and groups? I believe in patiently waiting for that. Thank you.